Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I am boiling alive in this little laundry room office hobby station that I currently reside in the Pacific Northwest. It's a little cooler than it was yesterday, but I'm not going to keep this camera on me very long because I'm probably going to start sweating profusely because my laundry room is in the upstairs of the house. So it gets really hot up here. If you hear a little bit of a fan noise in the background, that's so that I can try to stay a little bit cool today while we dive in and we paint this jean gray. And I have to be honest, I'm really, really excited. Obviously, look at the shirt to be back with the X-Men. It's been a while since we've gotten to paint some of these awesome characters on stream. So I'm really looking forward to doing Jean Grey. I know that Dallas Kemp has Omega Red coming up, I believe, this Thursday. So we're going to be covering a bunch of the new X-Men characters that are coming out in July for most of the world, or maybe, depending on where you are, who knows? Everything's a little screwy when it comes to the global and shipping logistics right now. As we come out of the pandemic, finally, I see a lot of people in the chat talking about how they're getting back to their game stores to finally start playing games. So awesome, so excited. But let's go ahead and get this Jean Grey ready to go. It should be a fun time. We're just going to be painting yellow and blue and a little bit of skin, and we're going to call it good. So I think we can get through her in an hour. We're going to find out what happens. I'm going to switch this camera off of me and continue to boil alive in secret. So here she is, star of our show, right here, ready to go. So that's a great question. How do I handle the crazy heat when I'm painting? The biggest thing is that I always use a bit more water. Obviously, if I had one right now, I would totally be using a wet palette. But the biggest thing is that I just kind of have to stay aware of the fact that my paint is going to dry out a lot faster than it normally would in any other day in the Pacific Northwest. So it just comes down to being really, really cognizant of making sure that I'm thinning the paints really well, that I'm always reapplying clean water to them, and make everything going on. So, but yeah, this is pretty uncharacteristic for us. This is one of the rare times where I'm like, man, if I had a wet palette, that'd be really great. I don't, so I've just been painting, and I also paint in the mornings when it's cooler anyway, typically for my personal hobby time. So I normally don't typically hobby in the prime heat of the afternoon and late evening. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to mix up a nice yellow ochre using these two colors. So we have Sahara yellow and a little bit of uh, Tinari, I don't know, some kind of tea name yellow. I've just mixed those up a little bit on my well palette to create kind of a yellow ochre color. And this is how I'm going to be starting the yellows of my suit. And when you're painting yellow, this can be a really tricky color. We've kind of covered it several times because a lot of our favorite X-Men characters do wear a lot of yellow and blue, especially from the 90s era, which we like to pull our initial X-Men designs from, just being kind of the iconic Jim Lee costume. So much of the costumes have become beholden to kind of this initial design when the X-Men took off and soared in popularity again. Of course, the cartoon helped that a lot as well. So we definitely wanted to start kind of with the homage of these. So yellow and blue, they're our friends. I know yellow can be a really tricky color to paint, similar to white. I certainly struggled with yellow a ton. One of the great things about working on Crisis Protocol and doing the X-Men was that it really forced me into practicing the yellow and learning a recipe that worked. And the biggest trick that I learned, much like painting white, is don't really paint with pure yellow. You want to paint with effectively yellow ochres, browns. You can use oranges. Dallas did a yellow where I can't remember what he started with, but it was some crazy like orange color. And then he moved it up into a yellow. That was on his crystal, I think. So there's lots of different ways to approach yellow and still make it look yellow. And of course, the underlayers that you choose for the yellow will also have some effect in terms of how the final result looks and all that good stuff. I like to use this kind of like yellow ochre mix. It covers really well. It still maintains a nice yellow base to it though, so it serves as a really good and strong foundation for getting up to kind of more of those primary yellows. But even if you're just trying to move a little quick and get through things in an hour, like we often like to do on this stream, is just tabletop ready in an hour, as close to as possible, or all the way if we can make it. We always aim to do it. Sometimes we get there, sometimes we don't. You can honestly just use this as your foundation and really do maybe a wash if you want to, or maybe like some really quick um, fabric highlights with the little scritches that we like to do um, on this, and then call it good. So the Zenith Prime obviously helps a lot as well because we're painting over mostly a light gray rather than a harsh black. If you do just prime in like a black or a really dark gray, this might take a couple extra coats. Um, as with all things, don't rush it. Take your time. Do thin coats, thin, even coats. If it's splotchy to begin with, don't worry about it. Don't overwork the area, just leave it alone, come back to it with another thin coat, and eventually you're going to build up that nice solid layer of color. No paint is opaque. People like to, we think of paint as being opaque, like it covers in one go or covers the first time. It never does. All paint is translucent to a greater or lesser extent. Typically, the brighter the color, the more translucent it is. So yellows, oranges, reds, those colors that are really vibrant. Greens can have the same problem as well if they have a lot of yellow in them, so they're really bright greens. They're not going to be opaque. They're very translucent. So just make sure to keep that in mind and take your time and don't get frustrated and don't try to speed through it. A really solid foundational base coat is going to make everything else go quicker. So as my Air Force colonel of a father used to like to tell me, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Just keep that in mind whenever you're doing painting or really anything. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You're always going to be quicker if you just take your time, do it right, focus on what you're doing rather than trying to speed through it, because inevitably you'll have a lot more stuff that you'll have to fix, or at the very worst, you'll have to redo if you try to go a little too fast. I'm just going to continue to knock out these yellows. I know that BK posted the cards for Jean last week. That was really fun to watch everybody get a view of the X-Men's first Threat 5 character, outside of Cable. So I guess second, but first, what I would consider the first uncanny X-Men 5 threat character. Cable's certainly been on the X-Men before, but not that classic 90s era theme. She is a ton of fun, pairs so well with Cyclops too, which was one of the big things that we kind of looked for as we were designing the rules and stuff. In general, so much of the X-Men like discussion and design and development work was really focused on, you have all of these like really potent, especially Jean and Cassandra Nova, who comes in the pack with her. Like you have two very powerful telepaths. Now they also get to do a whole lot of crazy stuff in terms of their telekinesis. And Cassandra Nova, for those who have had some have read the character and seen her in either X-Men Red or some of the other Hickman stuff, or maybe you read the fun 1992 X-Men run when they were doing the Secret Wars / Battle World event, when all the realities like collapsed in on themselves and Doom saved some of it with Doctor Strange, all that nonsense. She was in that as kind of the primary antagonist as well. She also can like manipulate flesh, and I think it's called biokinesis and stuff. So she's got a lot of crazy powers. But of course, the big one that we had to kind of focus on was telepathy and what does that mean in the game. And we've done some, MODOK has some manipulation and stuff. So we knew moving characters was a big thing. But we don't really do a lot of control effects in the game in terms of like taking control of other people's miniatures and characters and stuff like that. We actually, I think Pagani and I talked a little bit about that at one of the mini extravaganza panels. The question was, what thing have you ever tried to do that never worked out? And the answer to that, in all honesty, is like taking control of other people's characters, like full control. It just doesn't, it's a very difficult rule to write. It always has a lot of loopholes. It's very exploitable. And so in the end, we kind of have kept away from it because every time we've tried, it's never really worked out. And so then the question becomes, well, how do you do these telepathic characters in interesting ways and let them kind of shine? Oops. These little side pads, depending on the reference you're looking at, are either blue or yellow. I decided that I like them yellow, so we're going to do them yellow. to start. But anyway, so it was like coming up with how these characters would work. Of course, we wanted to make them kind of feel very similar. Be really inspired. At the time that we were working on this, I was neck deep in the X-Men Red run, which featured Jean Grey as the leader of X-Men Red. And her primary antagonist throughout that entire run was, of course, the one and only Cassandra Nova. Really awesome comic run. If you haven't read it, I would, and you like the X-Men, check it out. Even if you don't like the X-Men, check it out. I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge Jean Grey fan. Like, I liked her well enough. She was part of the X-Men, but she wasn't a character that I felt really strongly about on her own. And that X-Men Red run really turned me around on her. I became a really big Jean Grey fan. I thought the creative group that handled that whole series did an amazing job. The story is really fun. You can see a bunch of Magneto helmets come into play at the very end. I'm not trying to spoil too much, but if you ever wondered like what an army of superheroes in Magneto helmets would look like, you do get that moment in the comic. So it was like super cool to check out and read and all that stuff. And I strongly urge you to check it out as well. Cassandra Nova is an absolute monster in that series and is just fantastic, super fantastic. And it was really fun to kind of pair those two together. And I think introduce a character that maybe more classic X-Men fans may not have a lot of exposure to. More modern readers have witnessed the horrors of Cassandra Nova, and honestly, just Cassandra's backstory and being like the twin of Xavier, but some supernatural entity, and being eaten in the womb or murdered in the womb. I think she gets strangled by Xavier because he can tell she's evil to start, and all of like she's just such a quintessential like X-Men crazy, over the top villain like story thing, which I love. You know, I don't read X-Men primarily for the believable like storylines. I read it for the soap opera drama. I mean, come on, super serious. I'm gonna switch over to some Holder Blue while that yellow dries. Whoop. We're gonna use this to kind of block out our blues, nice and rich and ready to go. So we're just gonna thin this down a little bit. But yeah, so the thing that I think people will really like to exploit, with Jean and Scott specifically, is there's a lot of character out of activation character movement you can do with those. You've got Scott's incredible superpower that allows him to advance an allied character short, which I think a lot of folks have a tendency to overlook when evaluating that character and his strengths. It's effectively, it's just the team tactic card, tactical analysis, but he just has it as a superpower. So he can just turn it on whenever he wants to, which is pretty phenomenal. I mean, anytime a character typically has a team tactic card as a superpower, which means it's always active for them, it's pretty nuts. You can be pretty guaranteed that's a powerful effect. And then, of course, you combine that with Jean's, and I'm going to forget the names now because I'm trying to concentrate and paint, and it's been a while. But Jean's ability to push an activated character short, and now you've got, like, Scott can move your characters, she can move opposing characters, she can get your characters back into contest range and stuff like that, or, if they get moved out by a MODOK who takes a later activation, she can fix what he just did. A Shuri, she can, like, address what she just did, all that stuff. And then, of course, she's got the mental shielding, so MODOK might not even get the chance to move your character because you can just shut it down. So they play a really strong scenario game together, and they're an amazing 9-point combo. And that's before factoring in some of the tactic cards that they have, which, have some fun, some fun synergies, and of course, as we like to do with tactic cards, some great narrative tropes. You'll see that I think it's been shown off, but if not, I'm just going to spoil it. There's, of course, the classic Jean card, which allows Scott or Wolverine to get some bonuses when Jean inevitably falls down, like she does in the comics, and they get their big moments of like big optic blasts or Wolverine going berserk. Their favorite redhead has fallen down and may not get back up again until she totally gets back up again. But might be a little while. It might be a little while. So then you can find that if you want a little bit of that. That makes your opponent have to carefully consider, auto activation attacks, especially retaliatory attacks, can be pretty potent in the game, especially depending on when the dazing or the KOing happens. So it can be a useful in your back pocket. I'm not going to claim it's the best card in the game. It's super thematic and fun, and we did see it used to some devastating effects in playtest once or twice. I think Josh, who was a huge proponent of actually putting the card into the game and was art directed the stat card or the tactic card art for it, and was just so pleased with himself with the way it came out. And it turned out really cool. He actually was one of the people who pulled it off, like devastating game-winning effects. He managed to do it, and it was like, yeah, you even pulled off the Gene card, and it did this, and it was crazy, and all this stuff happened. And I was like, that's awesome. And of course, he's never stopped talking about the time where he pulled off the Gene card. So always look for those fun kind of moments, especially with tactic cards. You can choose the most efficient cards for your list in terms of like, what's my game plan? How am I going to win? What makes my characters the best? Or you can choose, just like with rosters and everything else, to kind of look at the list in terms of what's the story I want to tell, what are my favorite characters, what are moments I want to kind of recreate on the table in terms of my story. And, one of the strengths of the game is that we obviously do our best to make sure that both paths are open to people, and in between paths and all that, options are always good. So we try to not lock people into one side or the other. You want to play the game. If you want to play the efficiency game and build the best squad and roster, all that stuff that you want, you can do that. I see that BK posted the Gene card text in the chat, so you can see exactly what it does. Thanks, BK. True friend. Yeah, that's really cool. And then Mental Domination, which is another card that comes in their pack, is the one that we kind of always reference as, started as the, this is going to be the one. This is the time when you're going to be able to take control of another character or another player's miniature and do nutty stuff with them because you're mentally dominating them. And we went through, I don't even know how many different iterations of the ability and the rules, and it got to the point where it was just like the card functioned, but it wasn't fun and it wasn't thematic, and it honestly probably wasn't even that great 9 times out of 10 in terms of what it did. And so we kind of looked at it and made the decision that once again, taking control of other people's characters in the game just isn't the way to go. So we changed it. It's got a really cool effect now that is very potent and thematic. I'm really happy with where it turned out. It's and it's a great piece of art too. Josh did a really good job art directing that one and capturing the flavor and the idea that Cassandra Nova is taking over the brain meats of one of the X-Men and turn them against their allies, much to their horror. So, lots of fun stuff going on there. But, as many people have pointed out, this is just Jean before the Phoenix really takes her over and all that. So, like we talk about, there's so many different iterations and time periods of a character. I would love to go back at some point and really do the X-Men Red version of Jean Grey. because I just love that storyline, and I think there's obviously leadership potential with that character, and she has a different kind of expression of power sets and stuff in terms of what she does in that storyline. So that would be really fun. Of course, Jean as the Phoenix is yet another time period of the character that I think is really iconic and something that can make a lot of sense, whether it's an ultimate encounter or something else. So I love the amount of exploration, playground, and all of that stuff that we really get to enjoy and muck around in when it comes to working on MCP and in the Marvel Universe and all that stuff. It's a blast and so fun. And sometimes it's really difficult to kind of narrow things down. So it's very difficult to narrow things down a lot, honestly. Where do you want to go next? What outfit do you want to do? What tactic card should you add in? What are the story moments you want to tell? All right, so there's our blue kind of laid down. You can see that Hulder blue that just really pops through as a wash. Honestly, you don't even have to do anything else to this after this. And really the yellow is like really solid too. But we're gonna keep going. We're only 20 minutes in. We got lots of time left to go. So, just want to get the top part of this really quick. And I did pretty good at not getting blue everywhere. I got a little blue down here, so we'll fix that. Oh, so I went off camera and got a little thing. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to do a really quick yellow wash. And I'm just going to mix in sorry, I just want to fix this. I got to get really quiet because it's a tight little spot. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of red, like the smallest dash of red Inktense ink in with a whole bunch of yellow ink to create an orange, kind of an orangey yellow. I just want the faintest hint of that red, just to give a little depth to it, because the yellow Inktense is like really, really red, or is really, really yellow. And we don't want that. We want more of a shade here. So just kind of like knock that stuff in. Cyber Insanity asks, does Marvel have influence on characters you choose to release, or you guys have full control? It's a partnership. So Marvel has been an amazing partner. They're super fun to work with. They don't dictate things. They're not, they're very interested in us exploring all of the characters in the universe as well. And, of course, the folks that we get to work with have their favorites. But they're really good about, they're really great partners in that they definitely help with kind of suggestions or guidance. If we're looking at a specific kind of like group or a specific release window, and we get to have that conversation with them about, well, this is what we're thinking, and from time to time they'll be like, well, this person or this character, this group might be really great to kind of focus on because they're going to have a big moment on the publishing side, or we're stuck between a couple different versions of this character. Which one do you think is the best, the most iconic version of the character that we can focus on from the fan perspective, that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of that is them just knowing the broader audience and having more of those like overviews on what's going on. So they've been really awesome. They've never come in and thrown their foot down and been like, you must do this. It's always a dialogue, and it's very much a partnership. And I think that's been really nice. And it's great to have their knowledge and expertise on that, and their wisdom and kind of guidance, because, as fans and longtime readers of these comics, everyone at Atomic Mass pretty much has their favorite characters and the people that they desperately want to see, just like everyone in the community does. And sometimes you need that like outside guidance to be like, okay, well, yes, X, Y, or Z character is pretty fun, but have you thought about maybe doing this? Um, and of course there are characters that go on the list and then sometimes they get moved for whatever reason, say a global pandemic comes up and your schedule shifts a bit, and so then it just becomes a question of like, okay, well, how do we get back to that question? How do we get back to that? Does Jean do better? Honestly, I think she does well under both leaderships. I think that um, from my perspective in my games with her, I think that she really excels with Cyclops. Again, because of all of the control that you get over um, your squad's movement and the enemy squad's movement through Scott's tactical leadership ability, um, and then her own. And honestly, uh, the blue team leadership allowing you to spread out the power cost of some of your bigger attacks, Jean really likes as well. She can either act as a battery for the rest of the team if somebody needs that extra power to get in there, and who doesn't want a berserker barrage as early as possible with Wolverine, or optic devastation with Cyclops. She can be really clutch in those situations because she will generate power like crazy between, anyone who's put MODOK on the table knows that psionic blast attack is just clutch at generating so much power. For the skin, I'm just going to start with a base of Ishtar Pink. This is my normal go-to scale 75 skin tone base. So she's going to be generating power like crazy. So she can really help like pass it out, make sure that the team is functioning really well. She can use her abilities along with Scott's to just kind of win the positional game. So I think she's very great with Cyclops. If you want to play that kind of like, it's sort of like Web Warriors, but like the reverse Web Warriors, where instead of necessarily worrying about moving your opponents a ton, you're primarily moving yourself a ton. Um, but Storm's leadership, of course, it adds a fantastic level of survivability to her, and that additional place effect can be absolutely massive as well, and it stacks fairly well with her ability to push enemy or allied miniatures characters in the position that they need to be. Honestly, with the X-Men roster the way it is, and the way in which you choose your leadership, which leadership is active, if I'm playing X-Men, I almost always have Storm and Cyclops on the table at the same time, and then once I get to see all of the information when deployment happens, I pick the leadership that I think is most appropriate, and that to me is just so strong and versatile. When it comes to the dual leaderships, seeing a lot of folks now, I've been seeing a lot of dual leadership lists with like Sin and Red Skull. Pretty soon we're going to have, Captain America and Sam Wilson. I know a lot of folks have talked about how they want very different squad constructions, and I think that is true to some extent. But obviously, Sam works great with Cap, with Steve Rogers. So having them both on the table at the same time and switching that leadership in a pinch is totally great. And certainly something that shouldn't be overlooked as far as value goes. So when it comes down to, like, which leadership do I run her most with? It really comes down to, for me, since I know both leaders are going to be on the table, because I think Storm adds a lot of value to the overall X-Men roster, even when she's not using her phenomenal leadership. I'm not going to deny that her leadership is amazing. But I think Storm still has value in the X-Men outside of that leadership. And I've used her to great effect without using the leadership ability. So, you kind of get both. You never really have to worry about picking. Do I ever take Jean outside of affiliation? I have. I don't, for me, the Threat 5 characters are kind of something that you build around. They're not, I don't view them as much as splash characters, but I think if you want Jean's toolbox of abilities, she works really well in Avengers, um, especially under that Steve Rogers leadership. She can do pretty well in A-Force. So there are definitely options. Of course, MODOK players or people familiar with MODOK will tell you that Sonic Blast or Bolt is really great with Cabal, and it's only going to generate more power for her, which can be really powerful. I'm just trying to figure out what hair color I want. So I want the really orangey hair color. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just mix up some orange ink, and I'm going to set that down, and we'll be good to go. But yeah, so I think you can take her. You can definitely take her out of affiliation and see success, just like you can with any character. I think it's a little more. It's a little more. What's the word that I want here? Thought out. There's a term for it that I can't think of right now because I'm slowly melting. You have to be more purposeful, I guess. It's not like a 2-point Black Widow or Toad, right? Where you're just like, well, they're going in the roster. Maybe I'll use them, maybe I won't. Even 3-pointers, like 3-threat characters, I think you can sub once you have your core 6 or 7 characters. Maybe you even have 8, and you're just like, well, I don't know what last 2 to take, so I'll take Zemo because I love Zemo. Honestly, I love Zemo. So he goes almost, and I'll take Taskmaster because I love Taskmaster. Like, doesn't matter what the rest of the roster is. Those two just have uses, and they sub in really well. Almost never am I like, well, I have most everything figured out. I have 2 slots open. I'm going to take Thanos and Thor. Like, those are not characters that you just splash in randomly because you want to splash them in. They're purposeful, right? Now, I think you can take a Thor, let's say in A-Force, or a Thanos in Avengers, but you're making kind of a purpose about how those things are going to work and how everything's going to go. I'm going to jump over really quick to the little energy swoosh because I think we're going to have time to do that today based on how this is going, because this is going great. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some off-white. There's a couple of different versions of this available in scale, and I'm just going to grab the first one that pops into my hand. So we're going to use in the car. Why not? It's a little more greeny, but it'll be fine. And I just want to kind of come through and really knock the zenith up. So yeah, so can she work in many other affiliations? I 100% think that she has a place in a lot of different affiliations as a character, but as a threat 5, and this is true of all of the higher threat. Once you get over threat 4, and even some threat 4s, this is true for, but especially threat 5 and then above. When we design and develop those characters, we're really thinking like, okay, if a player decides to add this character to their roster, they are making a decision to kind of build around this character. So they need to do something that is, special, unique, different. You look at the recently released Amazing Spider-Man. He changes how Web Warriors wants to play, regardless of whether you're using his leadership or not. And he kind of gives you a focus. He gives you a center point. These bigger cost characters are kind of, they act as centerpieces in a way, but to list construction. So you're not just going to like randomly toss them in and see a lot of luck with them. You're still going to have a plan. Even somebody as straightforward, quote unquote, as Thor at the 5-point cost, who really just wants to go up and smack things with his hammer. You still have to kind of like, you're still theming around that, right? Like, what's my Thor delivery system? How am I going to get there? How's that going to work? What role is he going to play in terms of like the rest of the team's needs and wants? And how am I going to maximize his ability to hit things really well with his hammer. And that's just fundamentally true. It's part of the thing that really like guides our decisions and helps us determine skill sets and power sets, and we kind of balance around that. And then it becomes like a whole thing of this character really forces you to do X or Y, and it's like, well, yeah, that's you've made the choice at the point that you're taking a Jean Grey. You've made the choice to utilize whatever she brings you, and I think that honestly, her psychic shielding ability is so huge and so useful, and will only have value added to it as the cast of characters in the game continues to expand, because you're just going to see more and more of these different superpowers and attacks and all this stuff. So it's ready to go. Out of curiosity, was it a group company choice to go sales 75 paint? We looked at a number of different paint lines in terms of just like what was easy and really robust. Scale just happens to have a lot of great colors, and it is easy for us to get a hold of. So we kind of landed on that. We do. I use a decent amount of Vallejo as well. What I tell people is, honestly, use everything. Find whatever works for you. Find a mix. Don't stick to one paint line. Scale just happens to be really nice because it's so comprehensive, and we have access to it, that it works well for what we need to do on streams. So, okay, let's do the X really quick while we let that white dry. And here we go. So I think we're just going to do the classic. I'm just going to do the classic black and red. I'm not going to do it metallic. So just really quickly come in, block this out. I'm going to do my best to kind of leave the openings between the X's. I mean, I was a little sloppy, so I definitely have blue in there instead of white, but even still, the red will cover a lot easier over that than it will over anything else. Oh, I totally got off camera there. My bad. Okay, and then I'm just going to shift to white. I'm going to use this Mayhem Red. It's really quick. And we'll switch over to, it's going to be one of the few times where I'm going to use a finer brush. So I'm going to switch over to a 0, just because I want to get in between those X spots. And I'll try to stay on camera this time while I do it. So I'm just going to dot in between the X. I'm just going to let the paint fill up the cavity. Really easy, really simple. So we have the red and the X. We can go back through and highlight that in. Okay, let's go ahead, and that orange wash is still drying, so we're going to move over and we're going to grab some magenta. The magenta that we want is called fuchsia. Yeah. So this is the closest magenta in the scale range, so we'll use this. We're just going to really quickly thin this out to a wash. And we're going to wash it over the energy swoop. We're going to use this as an undertone, and then we're going to shift over to using the Fluor paints. Let's just be pretty thin. And we're going to expect that our white is completely dry now because it's so warm. How could paint still be wet? The one benefit of what's going on right now is that we don't have to watch paint dry for as long. So that's cool. So I'm just going to smoosh this on. I'm not too concerned about how much is going on or where. I'm going to kind of let it just flow where it wants. The only big concern is that I want to make sure that I'm not getting it on any of the suit. If it did get on the suit, though, you could very easily just kind of artist it into some OSL effect over the yellow. So that's why doing stuff like this last or at the end of the process can actually be beneficial. Because honestly, if you get a little bit of that wash over the suit, it'll just kind of look like a little bit of OSL. Because if you're doing true OSL in the fancy method, that would be how you'd want to do it. You just want to do a bunch of transparencies. Knock it through. I'm just going to go back through with kind of a semi-damp brush and pull up some of those pools and stuff. This isn't going to be my only layer, of course, so I'm not as concerned with like the white still showing through and things like that. And if it's sploochy, that's okay, because we want it to kind of look glowy and energy-esque. Again, the only thing that I'm really watching for here is I personally want to avoid getting any amount that I can on the suit itself. This OSL is really cool, and when it's, you know, I always appreciate it when I see it done, but for my own like personal kind of painting style and miniatures and stuff, I don't try to do OSL really ever unless it's very intentional. Like if I'm like, oh, it'd be super cool if this person had a glowy hand, you know, if we really wanted to give Jean Grey like a glowy hand, or there's literal energy effect around the hand, then obviously like I think OSL becomes a little more useful. But just kind of working OSL on, it's not particularly the thing that I love the best. So we have a nice little tint going on there with that magenta, so we'll let that dry, and then we'll kind of go back through and we can use some fluorescence. Kind of knock that out, and then I might just go back through a little bit and even spread out some of that a little bit more. And this is definitely a point where I can kind of say I have a lot better control over this wash. You can see it's not adhesing, it's not adhering in some sections. It's kind of like running off, like especially right here. You can see that on camera. I'm not sure because it's kind of at a weird angle. But that's because I'm using a little too much water. I really should have used some glaze medium or mixing medium, matte medium, any kind of like artist medium, an extender. And that would have stopped it from pulling quite as much. And that definitely is just a good practical kind of example of why having a couple artist mediums in your toolkit is so useful, because water will only take you so far before it just won't work. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to grab that Ishtar pink. I'm going to grab a little bit of white, a little basic flesh, I think, and we're just going to do some quick skin tone work. Maybe if I can find it. Find it! There we go. No, that's not it. Maybe I won't, because it's gone. All right, forget that. We're not going to do that. We'll go to the yellows. So I'm going to grab my same yellow mix. We're just going to do some highlights. So really quick, come in. And I'm going to grab the same base mix that I had. And I'm going to take a little bit of this Mardruk yellow, which is a very true like primary yellow. And I'm going to mix in a bit of that just to brighten it up. And we're just going to start doing some highlighting on the suit and reclaim a little bit of these areas. So, you know, kind of thinking about it, if you want to do a standard kind of like layer highlight, come over here where the knee is. I'm just going to grab my secondary brush and I'm going to blend it out. So all I'm doing is going into where I kind of applied the color, and then I'm just using the dampness of the brush to pull the color out and blend it across the surface area of the area that I want to have that highlight. So you can see how this is just really smoothing out. It's letting those transitions look really nice between the two. And so this is what Dallas calls a true brush blending technique. It's not wet blending for sure, because the paint isn't, you're not blending two different versions of paint on. Feathering is it's kind of like feathering, I suppose, in some ways, depending on the techniques, but this is just using two brushes to blend out the paint. Bring it down. The same way that we erase, very similar to how we talk about erasing mistakes, for example. That was a mistake. This isn't. So we're just going to kind of pull that color, and you're effectively using that translucency we talked about before that all paints have to your advantage. So kind of creating these really thin, transparent layers to create subtle blends over the different areas of the miniature. So for example, we have dark here, we have light here. If we had our light here in kind of a big glob, in kind of the volume shape that we want, when we come through and we pull that stuff down, you pull that across the entire area, and it creates a nice smooth transition from one color to the next very quickly. No muss, no fuss. Here on the chest, under the shoulder. Also let your paint go pretty far and wide. So come in here. If it wasn't so hot, if your paint doesn't dry very quickly, or it's cooler than it is right now, you can do a couple of different areas at the same time and blend them all out at once, which can be really helpful. You kind of just continue this. The nice thing about this two brush blending technique too is that with a traditional layer highlight, where you kind of build up the layers in smaller and smaller lines, right? You can go a bit with fewer layers, because that natural blending that's happening as you pull the color across the previous layer to use that translucency is actually creating gradients that in a normal layer you would have to create by mixing paint. So, Jean! Every time. Poor girl. I think that was part of my initial thing with Jean Grey, is she never really had her moment to be the badass she was, because she was kind of always stuck in that love triangle nonsense in the group dynamic, and X-Men Red really pulled her out of that. I know the new Hickman run, well, not really new anymore, but the current Hickman run that started with the House and Powers of X also kind of pulled her out of that trope as well, with the Summers family and stuff. But in X-Men Red, she was very much left to her own kind of devices to be Jean Grey, to just be powerful, not have to truck with the Phoenix stuff. It was nice to see that character just get a chance to kind of breathe and be her own powerful self. And I really responded to it for sure. And of course, like we talked about before, part of what you need for a great story is an incredible villain, and Cassandra Nova in that story is a fantastic foil to Jean. Just wonderful, just wonderful. So, all said and done, I'll go back to, if you haven't checked out X-Men Red, which is a few years old at this point, you absolutely should, because it was awesome. And it will definitely get you in the right mindset to be excited for Jean Grey. It will give you a whole lot of foundational understanding of Cassandra Nova. You get to see their very cool rivalry. It kind of inspired us to put them in the same pack, along with their very similar kind of power sets. So on the side here, I'm not really going to worry about blending. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do some like hashy lines, similar to in drawing how you do like hash marks to kind of transition color and shadows to highlights. Just going to do the same thing here. Build those up. Marvel Knights. That was that really a team, or was that just more of an imprint? See, to me, Marvel Knights, and I mean, I could be wrong about this because I'll be honest, I wasn't the biggest Marvel Knights reader. I like several of the characters from the Marvel Knights like imprint, but to me, I always thought that was just an imprint line. Like they weren't so much a team as it was just like the Marvel Knights imprint. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Marvel Knights really was kind of like an in-world, in-universe team. As Josh would tell you, it wouldn't be the first time. He tells me I'm wrong all the time. He's not here anymore though, so it's kind of hard to pick on him and try to make him feel bad because he's never around anymore. He used to hang out in chat and be the guy, but now BK will never leave me. You'll never leave me, right, BK? You're here forever. I don't think I can handle the rejection again. I don't think I can handle that rejection again. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Someday it's just going to be me in this sweltering laundry room, not even streaming, just talking to myself. Just talking to myself. I'm really liking where this yellow is coming out. I think we got those highlights are really making a difference. The last thing that I could do, which I probably won't do today because we're running out of time, is just go back through with a really bright yellow and start adding a bit of fabric stretch marks, little texture marks, and we do that all the time on the stream. So if you want to see how that's done, check out last week's stream, or really the Beast, when we painted Beast. That was definitely a very long, intense study in terms of scritches, because that's how we built up all of Beast's fur texture. Dallas did a really great job on his lockjaw with it, so if you want to go check out how Dallas did lockjaw. Same technique and idea applies there as it does here. You're just kind of like using those really light hatch marks to add that little bit of extra texture and highlighting to a cloth. And it's amazing how huge of an impact that technique can have and save you from having to do really nutty, like hard blends and all that stuff. So check it out, give it a try. Keep that secondary brush with you because it will absolutely save you some time and increase your results. So our yellows are done. Our blues are looking great just with that one simple wash. So I'm very happy with where we're turning out here. The hair looks awesome. There's like one little spot that I probably need to fix, which I think I can do with my yellow here where my blue got away from me. But honestly, at this point, if I want to take that hair to the next level, it would just be going back through with my yellow highlight here because I got that bit of orange ochre to it. And I can just kind of like give it those hair highlights. Just on the tips and stuff. There it goes. Come back to the back. Just find those little areas, those hair strands, because we got so much nice texture here. Build those up really quick. And if I wanted to, I could do a couple more glazes of that orange to bring it back down. Keep it nice and fiery. We're going for comics. We're not going for like a real red hair. Because obviously real redheads, they don't get into this orange level. Kind of like our Medusa. But if you look at her in the comics and stuff, she definitely has that animated kind of crazy orange colored hair. So there's that. So we give a little life to there. There's plenty of like shading we could do to the face, but honestly, the Zenith is taking care of that as well. So the last thing I want to do with our last little 6 minutes is I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to knock in some fluor color. And I think the fluor color I want is going to be this fluor pink. So acid pink, it's a fluorescent. Don't try to, definitely don't try and paint this on as like a base coat. They don't work that way. These are super translucent. They don't have the best of coverage because of how the paint is mixed. So what you really want to do, with them is you want to get a nice undercoat, your underlayer, like we did with the magenta here, laid down, because that will help with the coverage. And then what you can do is, I like to thin them down just a little bit and turn them kind of into a glaze. Just come over and do a really quick wash with the fluorescent. And then once this is dry, if you want to take it to that next level, you can come back in, mix a little bit of that magenta with a white, create like a really nice, almost pure white. Just a little hint of color to that white. And you come back in, you add like little energy splops or splitches, little electric effects. You can add little lightning bolts in there if you want, any kind of additional texture to kind of sell the idea that this is some really potent energy. You can dry brush a little bit of white on there. You can mix white with the fluorescent pink if you really want to, and then build it up with some dry brushing or some edge highlighting. So there's lots of different ways to go about it. At the end of the day, though, this will get a really, you can see just how punchy that is with some very minimal steps. So, that looks like we're pretty much in a great spot. I would call this 100% tabletop ready. There's a lot of great fluorescent paints out there. You can go to art stores. There's a lot of different artist brands as well. Experiment with them, see which ones you like. You know, they have their place and their purpose, and they can be very useful for doing glow effects and some other like really stunning visuals. But this is it. So here's my Jean Grey. Here's my Cyclops. These two look ready to get on the table together and do some fighting. And we knocked out that Jean Grey in just about an hour. So that ready and set to go. Hopefully this has given you some information on how to tackle your own Jean. When she hits store shelves, it looks like one Mr. BK has been saying July 9th. So watch for that. Very fun miniature to paint, very, very straightforward and simple character, but some really stunning results. Just love everything about how this character came out and the way she looks and all of that stuff. And then, of course, on the table, Blast to Play, an amazing addition to the X-Men. So I'm looking forward to it. With that, thank you so much for joining me, chat. I hope you had a great time. Be sure to tune back in tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific. As we have more good stuff. Oh, I have so many lights on me. It's okay, though, because I'm like so grody. That's better. So be sure to check back in tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific for more streaming action. I believe it's going to be Mr. John Schaefer because we're going to be playing a game on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. So if you're interested in seeing some of our other games played, jump in at Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then, of course, on Thursday, Dallas Kemp is going to be doing Omega Red. I know a lot of folks in chat were talking about how excited they were about that. So be sure to tune in for that. I can't wait to see it. I haven't painted my own Omega Red yet, so I'm probably going to steal some ideas from one Mr. Dallas Kemp. He's been waiting for almost 18 months since we started talking about this character to finally put a paintbrush on him, because it is one of his primo favorite X-Men characters. So I'm excited to see him jump in on that. Other than that, be safe, stay beautiful, stay cool, and be good to each other, chat. Till then, we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.